Benvenuto. Welcome to Cherry Hill Home Cooking. My name is Mark. Today we're going to be making sticky toffee pudding. I haven't made this before, so hopefully this comes out the way it should, and it's as delicious as I've always thought it would be. We watch a lot of British television, and you always see sticky toffee pudding, or someone's talking about it, or I see it on the British baking shows. And for years, it's something I've wanted to try, but just never have. So we haven't made a dessert in a while, so I thought, oh, let's do sticky toffee pudding. Now, when we here in the U.S. think of pudding, we think of something different than what this really is. This is what looks to be like a nice, fluffy cake. Then you pour toffee topping over it, let it soak in for a little while, and you have it with a little bit of heavy cream or vanilla ice cream, which is what we're going to have it with today. But anyway, I must have looked at 50, 60 recipes, either books, online. They're all a little bit different. I've seen it made with dates. I've seen it made without dates, with different spices. And I thought, since I'm making a British dessert, I should go right to the source. So this is Mary Berry's recipe. You all probably know Mary Berry from either the Great British Bake Off or numerous appearances on TV. She's a wonderful cook and baker. So this is her recipe. So what are we going to need for it? Okay, to start off, we need some self-rising flour. We need brown sugar, light brown sugar, or dark brown sugar. Now, the recipe actually calls for muscovado sugar, if I'm pronouncing that right, which I probably am not, which is similar to our light or dark brown sugar. It's not the exact same thing, but everything I researched said that this is the closest to it. Mary calls for light muscovado sugar in her recipe, which I'm going to use the light in the cake, and then you make a separate sauce for it. I'm going to use dark for that because the sauce looked really, really dark in color. Then we need some whole milk. Okay, even though Mary's recipe calls for self-rising flour, it still calls for a teaspoon each of baking soda and baking powder. It's going to be a really nice, light, and fluffy cake. We need 2 large eggs. It specifically says 2 large eggs. And we need, in the recipe, 3.5 ounces of butter, which is roughly about, we'll translate that in the recipe in terms of teaspoons. If you don't have a scale, I've used a scale to measure everything out, so I did go by the ounces in the recipe, but we'll put it in cups and tablespoons for you. Now, one of the other things that we don't quite have the exact same thing they use in England is Mary's recipe calls for black treacle, which is kind of like molasses, but isn't molasses. It's actually the same kind of process of how molasses is made, but American molasses is, I believe, boiled down or evaporated a little bit more, which kind of gives it a little different flavor. Again, in researching it, it says if you can't get that, the closest thing to it that we can get in America is something called blackstrap molasses. So blackstrap molasses. Okay. Now, while we're on that subject, I was hoping I'd be able to get the treacle. We have a large national supermarket chain that has a really nice international aisle. I don't know if you all remember, a while back we made flapjacks, which is another kind of British classic dessert, which is actually kind of like it's a sweet oatmeal bar. Not quite a granola bar, kind of similar taste, but it has more of a consistency than I'd say something like Rice Krispie treats. By the way, if you haven't watched that video, take a minute and watch it. If nothing for the comedic factor, because that was another thing I had never made, but I had seen a lot on different programs we watch, and I think it took me 3 or 4 times to figure out the proper oat to use. And Wade thought it would be hilarious to put all of my fails in the video. So you get to see little bits and pieces of each disaster until I found the right mixture, or the proper oats that they use. So anyway, it's quite funny. All right, so that's for our cake mixture. Now, the sauce that goes along with it is, looks absolutely delicious. In Mary's recipe, it calls for double cream, which the closest we would get to double cream, or the counterpart of it here, is heavy cream. Again, you need another 3.5 ounces of butter. I've got, again, the measurements will be in the recipe, but this is, for the sauce you use 4.5 ounces of, I'm using dark brown sugar, and you need some oatmeal. So it looks like a lot of ingredients, but it's really just a quick cake. So I think at this point, I'm going to put this to, oh, by the way, set your oven to 350 before you start to mix it. That way it'll be preheated. And one other thing, you're going to need a 9x12 baking dish. Of course, it needs to be buttered. So while we got it out, we'll butter it. You got to butter the bottom and up the sides. In Mary's recipe, she calls for a 3-quart pan, I believe it is. And other recipes I've seen had almost the same exact measurements for the other things. It called for a 9x13 pan. So you don't have to, we're not going to flour it. It doesn't say to flour it, but give it a good coating of butter. I suppose you could use vegetable shortening if you want. This Mary's recipe calls for butter. So I've got really just about a 1/2 tablespoon of butter in there. And make sure you get up the sides and in all your corners. Okay. All right, let's get baking. All right, guys, again, we've got our oven preheating to 350. Now, in Mary's recipe, it says 360 Celsius, I believe it was, which roughly translates to 352 Fahrenheit. My oven only goes up in increments of 5, so I think 350 will be the better choice than going up to 355. If it's going to bake a couple minutes longer, it shouldn't affect it. Okay, the other thing it says we need 8 ounces of self-rising flour. I already have my eggs, my blackstrap of molasses, butter in here, and we might as well put our sugar in. Now, the recipe says put it in all together. It doesn't say. It says put the butter, sugar, eggs, flour, baking powder into the bowl. It doesn't say to cream it. So Mary's been baking for many, many years, so a much better baker than I am, so we're going to do it that way. All right, so now I've got my scale converted to ounces, and I'm just going to measure it that way. Of course, in baking, you know, because it does need to be precise. It is probably the better way to measure in the ounces, but of course we tend to, in America, we just use a cup, and sometimes depending upon how hard you get your flour packed in that cup, you might be a little bit over or possibly even a little bit less. So, but of course 8 ounces of flour would be a cup. And there we go. So we got 8. Okay, so then it says to put your flour in there, and it says to put your baking soda and baking powder. Get out of there. Now, in Mary's recipe, it specifically says use a hand mixer. I don't have a hand mixer. I just have my stand-up mixer. I'm assuming she's saying use a hand mixer, electric hand mixer, because she's trying to get the point across that if you do it by hand, you're not going to be able to get it mixed together properly. So, like I said, we got to use the hand mixer because that's what I got. So, I'm gotta plug it in. Again, any of you that have watched us cook or bake, you know I'm petrified of getting my hand stuck in the mixer. So I always make sure I have the beater part on before I plug it in. All right, so let's get that going. And so Mary says, whisk for about 30 seconds or until combined. Turn that up a bit. Now that most of it's got. It's combining pretty good. I'm going to turn it up a bit just so that the stuff that's still in the mixer head will come out. And this will depend upon how softened your butter is. My butter had been at room temperature for a couple hours. I think that's good. What do you think, Wade? Looks mixed to me. Nicely combined. Yep. Pretty. Oh, it smells delicious, I think. All right, so then it says to gradually pour in, using for about, all right, pour in the milk gradually and whisk until smooth. We'll let that get combined before we turn it up. I'm probably putting about 1/4 of a cup in each time. I think years ago, the first time I ever saw sticky toffee pudding was on it was a challenge in the Great British Bake Off. And this shouldn't be confused with figgy pudding or fig pudding, which is very popular in England around, or in Britain, I should say, around Christmas time. And that isn't really a pudding either. But that's a steamed dessert. This is not steamed. Okay, I'm just going to grab a spatula to scrub down the sides. And get the bottom flowing in there. go for a few more minutes, or at least another 30, 40, 50 seconds. And you just want that all nicely combined. It should be, at least in our video, it looked like it was a little bit thinner than our regular cake batter. And I would say that looks about just like, let's give it a fast whip. All right, looks good to me. What do you think, Wade? Looks good?
Says I've never seen it before.
All right.
Looks good to me.
You notice I unplugged the mixer. Also, I know it's repetitive, but always remember, if you're using your glass bowl and you have a mixer like this and you've got the beater, the metal one, don't bang it against the bowl like that, or else you're going to break your bowl. That looks beautiful. That's just about the way it should look. Just check the bottom, make sure we got everything. I mean, it looks like a nice, soft, creamy batter, so it should be as a nice, soft sponge like it says in the description of the recipe. Alright, I think I've got every bit I can. Let's just kind of give it a gentle spread out to the edges. And I'm not going to bang it on the, I'm afraid that granite will break the glass, so we'll just give it a shake. All right, so according to the recipe, we are going to bake for 35 to 40 minutes or until well risen and springy in the center. All right, like I said, maybe because we're off that 2 degrees, and depending upon how accurate your oven is, it might take a little bit longer. But what I would suggest you do is you set a timer for 30 minutes, go in and check it at 30 minutes, and if it needs a little bit more time, put it back in the oven. Okay, Google, set a timer for 30 minutes.
All right, 30 minutes.
Now, one of the really nice things about this dessert is in making it right now, you don't have to allow the cake a lengthy cool down. We'll let it cool down a little bit while we're making the toffee sauce. According to Mary, she says you can make the cake ahead of time, 3 days, as well as your toffee sauce. Don't put the toffee sauce on top of the cake until you're ready to serve. Or I wouldn't do it 3 days ahead of time. If you're going to do it half hour or so before, it should be fine. But anyway, all right, we'll see you in 30 minutes. We'll see how our cake did and see if it's ready to come out of the oven. Okay, I checked it at 30 minutes. I didn't think it was quite spongy enough, so I've let it go to 35, maybe a little bit, 36 maybe. Let's take a look. Now in Mary's recipe, she says it should be nice and spongy. Well, that looks nice and spongy to me. It's not too spongy in the middle. What do you think? I think it looks pretty good, no?
Toothpick stick, maybe?
Well, I think it's such a moist cake that it's kind of hard to do it that way, but good idea. Let's try. Well, I mean, it did come out Nothing stuck to it. All right. So I think that's done. We're going to let that sit out here on the counter on a wire rack while we make our toffee topping. All right. So again, according to Mary's recipe, you basically throw all of the topping ingredients in a pan over medium heat. So in here I've got the dark brown sugar, I've got the butter, I've got the blackstrap molasses, I've got the vanilla, and let's add our heavy cream. So I've got this on medium. Let me grab a spoon. So the instructions say heat over medium low heat until the butter and all the sugar is dissolved. It's hard to describe what that cake smells like. It smells delicious. It smells like molasses. It smells like brown sugar. It smells like toffee. This is even starting to smell delicious. So it's probably going to take 5 minutes or so on medium low to melt. Okay, our butter is melted, and you can see the sugar is all dissolved into the liquid. All right, then it says to bring to a boil, so I'm going to turn this up to high, and I'm going to bring it to a good boil, which we're almost there. So we're not really making a hard toffee. Okay, so you see it's come to the boil. That kind of, all the bubbles are breaking up on the top. It's getting that little foamy look for it. So then the directions is stir it for a minute at the full boil. Because we want this to be able to be pourable. And again, it says to continually stir it for a minute. All right, that's just about 45 seconds. I glanced at the clock, so we'll give it another 10-15 seconds. All right, not having made it before, I don't know if that's exactly what it's supposed to look like, but I'm going to say we're there. And I'm going to let that just cool down naturally there for a few seconds before I pour it into my container. And the directions say to pour half of it on the cake and save the other half for serving. So, as soon as I'm ready to get this on the cake, we'll come back. Okay, our cake is literally just been out of the oven for maybe 5-10 minutes. If you're going to make this ahead of time, I would go to the point that you've baked the cake, cover it. If you're going to make it a day or two ahead, you certainly could make the sauce a day or two ahead too, and then kind of reheat it. Or what I might suggest is you make it shortly before you're going to serve it. So I put the sauce in a measuring cup because it says put half on the cake, and I wanted to make sure it was half on the cake. But it says just at that point, pour it over your cake. I don't know if the consistency, it looks similar to ones I've seen. I'm going to double check, and who knows, maybe it could be a little bit thicker, but I think either way it's going to be delicious. Of course, the idea is that you want your toffee to soak into the cake slowly. Okay, well, I'm going to say, although Mary doesn't specify if you have to let it sit and soak in a little bit, but I'm going to say that we're going to let it rest for maybe about 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and tell you how to plate it up. And then the best part, we're going to eat it. I'm so excited. See you in a bit. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys how I've seen it served. A couple different ways. I've seen them just kind of take an ice cream scoop, scoop a couple scoops of the cake out, put it on the plate. I've seen them cut it nice and neat. So we're going to try to cut it neatly. But like Wade just said, the first slice never comes out. But we're going to try to make it. Wow, it's such a nice soft cake. Don't go in there. All right, guys, let's see. Can we get it out? Ooh, look at that. Not bad. That will look pretty. Now, again, in Mary's recipe, she suggests using double cream or topping it and having a side with ice cream. That's in every different British video I've seen. They've always served it with the double cream, or in our case, heavy cream. So pour a little bit more of your sauce on, and then just kind of a dollop of your cream, and I think it would be perfectly delicious like that, but we'll throw a little bit of ice cream on it too. There you go. I have been waiting so long to have sticky toffee pudding. I can't wait. I put a little of the heavy cream on there too. We didn't eat supper tonight just for the calories.
This will be our
This
supper.
is our supper. And pour it in your supper. I'm gonna let you taste it first. Give me your honest opinion. It looks delicious.
Mmm. It is really light and fluffy.
Mmm.
That's good. That's delicious.
Let's see.
Wow. That is really good. That's delicious.
Mmm. That's
Wow.
absolutely delicious.
It's like
Because the only thing there was a butterscotch dessert that I made that's similar to this that I haven't made in a long time, but oh wow, that's delicious. Very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It tastes like toffee, it tastes like
Yeah.
brown sugar, it tastes like
with
all
the sauce, the whole thing just kind of melts in your mouth.
Oh, it's delicious.
Mm.
I think this is my new favorite dessert. And of course, watching it on video seems to take longer and be more complicated. It's as easy as making a cake. Delicious.
It is. I agree.
Alright, I have nothing else to say.
Oh.
I'm just going to sit here and eat.
Me too. After I tell you guys, so please like and subscribe. And check out cherryhillhomecooking.com.
Thank you so much. Ciao.
Bye. You see why you have the extra sauce on here too.
Yeah?
So you can just dip it in if you want.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good with it. With the ice cream. It's delicious. I think this is my new favorite dessert.